Well, hey there, and welcome to discussion number 12 for this semester's Intro to Sports Media class. A exciting virtual lecture for you today. What do we got? Today, discussion number 12, the sociological and cultural impact of sports media. What's that mean? What is today's discussion all about? Well, it's really a couple of things. We're going to look at it both from the employment perspective, what it means for you as a future job seeker, as someone who wants to make a career in sports media, and how it impacts society, how the sports media, broadcasters, writers, bloggers, podcasters, whoever, how they impact American culture as well. All right, so that's kind of what we're doing today, and we're going to spend some time watching, not all, but part of a documentary that our colleagues at the University of Minnesota put together as well. So I think it's a really important discussion today, and let's get right to it. This is my goal for today, all right? I want you to understand the impact of sports communications in the U.S. and globally, and then consider how we in the sports media can create and then, in essence, reinforce social myths and examine sports media portrayals of different sociocultural issues that are in our society, and then kind of evaluate how it all goes through. So that sounds like a lot of fancy schmancy academic jargon, but basically, here's the introduction, right? The media can impact society and culture in all ways, and we in the media can turn social myths into social realities, and that is not our job in the media. We as the media play a key role in shaping public opinion, and thus we have the power to influence and reinforce and create culture. And so the media, whether it's, again, on television or any broadcast platform or written platform, can shape beliefs and values, the dynamics of sports entities, teams, schools, individual players, athletes, and coaches, and the public's perception of everybody who's involved. All right, so some of this can be touchy, right? Because we're going to talk about race and ethnicity today. And some people find that to be an awkward topic, but it's important. And I want you to really understand why we're talking about it today. And your job as a journalist, your job as someone in the sports media is really important, and it's critical that you recognize it going in, right? All right, so let's start with this. Those of us in the media, particularly at the managerial level, the people that are making decisions on who to hire are really often scrutinized for not hiring and promoting minorities. Now, this is a complex issue because there's a lot of people who are mixed race or don't identify with a particular racial group. For women in our country, it has never been easier to get in what has been a male-dominated culture over the years, a male-dominated employment culture, right? Sports writers were always guys. Sportscasters were always dudes. Well, that's not the case anymore. That being said, it's still really hard. And what I'm proud of is, say, for example, what ESPN is doing. ESPN is hiring more women play-by-play announcers than ever before. I mean, think about it. It used to be the woman on the broadcast was an attractive sideline reporter, right? And while we still see that, the role of the woman broadcaster, the female sportscaster at ESPN has grown. And the company has taken great steps, I think, to not only develop female broadcasters, but to put them in situations where they can succeed, right? It doesn't make any sense to say, well, we're using a female play-by-play broadcaster, put her on the air, and she's not ready for it. And then that hurts the next female sportscaster who might be really good. And so what ESPN, I think, has done is they have put people in positions where they can succeed. Like Jessica Mendoza knows more about baseball than just about any man in this country, right? She knows baseball, and that's why she's a analyst on ESPN Sunday Night Baseball. So that is a great example of where ESPN is going with this. And I think as time goes on, we'll see more and more ladies, women involved in what have been traditionally male roles when it comes to sports broadcasting. Some of the top sports writers in this country today, and some of the most respected, are female writers, and that was not the case 25 years ago. If we look around at someone like a Christine Brennan, for example, or a Dana O'Neill. These are the two of the top 3 or 4 sports writers in America right now. And so I think that's where we've gotten in a profession now where it is easier than ever. That being said, it's still hard, right? It's hard whether you're a lady or a dude, right? I mean, it's hard right now to get a job in media and make a career out of it because of circumstances that have nothing to do with your journalistic integrity, right? It's the business model of where media is going these days, whether it's newspapers or televisions or radio or whatever it is. The number of jobs is going down, so it's hard. But the opportunities for ladies has never been greater than it is right now, and I'm really proud of that. But once we get these jobs, right, once we are on the air, once you're a columnist for the Washington Post, what is your role then? Well, so there was a little gender there, but let's talk a little bit of race here. And this is really important, right? Because the media's coverage of black athletes over the years has been really evolving, but it wasn't always good coverage. Until the 70s, black athletes got very limited sports coverage, and their performance was often characterized, as the screen says, by uncontrollable external forces, which is, clearly BS, right? So there was this era in television and newspaper where the media would describe the black athlete as just being a natural athlete. The white athlete was smart. He had great cerebral abilities. And the black athlete is a violent and hypermasculine guy. Well, if the media says that, which of course is not true, but if the media says it over and over, there's an example of where a myth becomes reality, right? So many times when I was a kid growing up, if there was a Dominican baseball player, a Hispanic baseball player, but more so someone from the Dominican Republic, and they would get into an argument with the umpire, you would hear the announcer say, "Oh, there's that Hispanic fire coming out. There's the passion of the Hispanic ball player, or the passion of the Dominican ball player coming out," and you would see a Tony Perez argue with an umpire, or a Latin baseball player argue, and they would always say it had something to do with his Latin roots. But if a white manager argued with an umpire, you didn't hear that. You never heard anybody say, "Boy, look at Tommy Lasorda. He sure is white. Look at him argue. He's showing his white passion," right? Or Sparky Anderson. And I noticed that as a kid, and I think that's really important, especially in a multicultural, global country that we live in. You guys are going to school, and it's kind of a secluded kind of college environment, right? College town. However, there's kids from all over the country sitting next to you. There are people from hundreds of countries that are enrolled at Virginia Tech. So you live and study in a global place. And you might have stereotypes of what someone from Guatemala or China or Spain or Germany or Canada or any country might be, right? But you're likely wrong. And if you're in the media, you're doing yourself and the viewers a disservice by perpetuating the myth and talking about those things on the air. And I think that is what is so critically important as a journalist. And as you look over the years, some individuals have burst through on this, right? In 1968, the Olympic Fists of Freedom changed the way America thought about black athletes. Muhammad Ali did the same thing. Arthur Ashe in tennis. Doug Williams, the first black quarterback in a Super Bowl. Magic Johnson, what he did as a collegian, as a pro, and now as a businessman. Same thing with Michael Jordan, as a collegian, as a pro, and then as a multi-millionaire from a shoe standpoint. And then Tiger Woods as well. I think that when you look at these guys, incredible athletes, tennis and football and hoops and golf, without question, great athletes. But they were much more than that in the way they impacted society. for other minorities, whether it's a Native American or Latin or Asian American athletes, sports has had a way of unfairly categorizing them. And our job in the media is to avoid that. Our job in the media is to not perpetuate the stereotypes. You may not be offended by the Washington Redskins mascot or the Cleveland Indians or a team like that or a nickname/mascot like that, but a lot of people in this country are. And as I mentioned earlier, the Latin American athlete is so often unfairly portrayed in this country as hot-tempered. As for employment opportunities for minorities, sometimes minorities are denied the prestige they've earned and are portrayed as less deserving than their white counterparts. That is true in all areas right now, in business and in law, and it's true in media as well. And that's why these characterizations can limit opportunities to get endorsements, play a particular position, be the quarterback on a high school team in some areas, or be the play-by-play announcer for an NBA team in some cities, or be the general manager of a Major League Baseball team in others, or an athletic director. I mean, think about it. We've seen the rise of black basketball coaches in college basketball, and clearly in the ACC we've seen that, but it's only been the last few years where we've had black football coaches in the Atlantic Coast Conference as well. And for many, many years, so many qualified people have not had those roles. And the same holds true in the NFL as well. Sports media have been criticized for their coverage of female athletes over the years. And the accomplishments and the contributions of female athletes sometimes get downplayed. And this is not fair, because if you look, for example, today on college campuses, 40% of all athletes are women. Okay, it's higher than that at Virginia Tech. It's higher than that at most ACC schools. But NCAA-wide, 40% of every athlete is a woman, but if you look at it, they're getting 43% of college scholarships. That's a lot of money. That's a commitment that the schools have made, yet they receive just 4% of media coverage. And that's what we're going to talk about in our University of Minnesota documentary today. I want you to take a look at how female athletes are portrayed, the coverage they get, when the television ratings, the interest among fans nationwide in this country reflect something different than what the media is giving it. And then there's a scene I want you to take a close look at in this documentary about Canada. If you watch Canada's version of SportsCenter, there's lots of women's sports. Why is that? Why, if you live in Toronto, Canada, Toronto, if you look at a map, right? Boston is north of Toronto, right? Toronto isn't that far north, right? It's just across the lake. It's just across the lake from Buffalo. Why do sports fans in Toronto enjoy watching women's sports more? Is it because they're more evolved? Are Canadians more open to women's sports? I don't know the answer to that, but what I do know is if you're a Canadian kid, you've grown up watching ice hockey by the Canadian women's team. And in your mind, some of your sports heroes are the female athletes. In Canada, the sports media treats men and women the same. Now, does that mean that the most popular teams aren't played by the men? Yeah, right? The Toronto Maple Leafs are one of the most iconic franchises in the NHL. The Toronto Raptors are having a great season. Yes, I'm not saying that the men's teams in Canada aren't more popular, but if you look at the distribution and the percentage of men to women's sports coverage in Canada, it's almost even. Whereas in this country, it's 96-4 percentage-wise. So we're going to take a look at that, and please pay close attention to this documentary. All right, that does it for discussion number 12 for today. Hope it was impactful for you. It was for me putting it together, and we'll talk with you soon.